Red Clover Blossom, Nourishing Herbal Infusion. Again, another one of my favorite. I guess they're all favorites of mine. They're all so good. Red Clover Infusion has so many benefits. There are, I feel, some debate out there about red clover, and so I want to clear some of that up in this conversation, as well as talk about the astounding amount of benefits that it has to offer us. So red clover, we are working with the blossom, very important, not the leaves. So, and I like to get the whole blossom. And so, I don't know if you can see that. Red clover blossom. This is an ounce of red clover blossom. It's a lot. It looks like a lot. And that's why we always want to weigh out our herbs, because if we think that we're going to get any benefit by putting a few flowers in a cup of tea, we're really not going to get the benefits. So if we really want to get the benefits of the red clover, we need it to weigh out an ounce and put it in a quart jar and make a nourishing herbal infusion. It looks like an extreme amount, but really most of it is air. You know, these red clover blossoms are very light and fluffy, especially when they dry. There's a lot of airspace in there. So it can be deceiving, which is why we want to weigh it out. So many minerals. So red clover, trifolium pratense, trifolium being 3 leaves. This is the classic red clover that you see growing in your yard or in your neighbor's field or on the side of the road. They have large light pink to purplish blossoms, not really red. There is a crimson clover, which is very red and more triangular blossoms, but that's not what we're working with. So it's red clover, though it looks more pink or magenta out in the real world, and it's the whole blossom that we're working with. Trifolium pratense is the species. Pratense means pasture dwelling. So this is the three-leaved plant that dwells in pastures. And yes, it's a great fodder crop for animals, and the bees love it too. I have fond memories as a child, taking each flower out of the clump, the flower blossom head. Each one of those it looks like a petal, but it's actually a true flower. Each one of those, what looks like a petal. Picking those out and sucking the sweet nectar out of it, pretending to be a bee. Loaded with vitamins. It has carotenes, which yield vitamin A when we process them in our body. It has a full complex of B vitamins, vitamin C, and also vitamin E. For minerals, we have selenium, we have zinc, calcium, magnesium, chromium, manganese, phosphorus, potassium, and then there's a whole host of trace minerals as well that come along for the ride. Now, also, there's allantoin in red clover, which is the classic healing constituent that's in comfrey, which we'll get into when we talk about comfrey. Also, phytosterols, which are known as plant hormones, I guess you could say, or constituents of plants that our body can turn into plant hormones. Phytoestrogen is what we most commonly hear is in red clover, but there's actually no plant estrogen. It's a phytosterol that our body can take, and actually it's the microbes in our body, the bacteria in our gut. If we have a nice healthy flora of bacteria in our gut, that they can take those phytosterols from the red clover and any plant, seed, flower, root, leaf, and then turn it into something that would look like and fit into hormone receptors in our body. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. Phytosterols, isoflavones, which is related, and loaded with antioxidants. and then it has all the amino acids. Now, something else that kind of leads to so one of the debates around red clover is its content of what is called phytoestrogens, and that kind of puts up a lot of red flags for people who are trying to avoid estrogens or who have estrogen dominant cancer, or just this word estrogen has, in modern day medicine, has scary intonations, ironically enough, because it's also what really makes us women is, the 30 different estrogens that we create. And then there's coumarins. And so yes, there is a drug that is a blood thinning drug called Coumadin, which is originally derived from a type of coumarin in a plant. Now there's actually, I think there's like 17 different types of plant coumarins, and they all have different actions on the body. They're not all blood thinning. So I have this book, which I love if you want to get serious about herbs and contraindications and clinical herbalism. This book is a must-have. Botanical Safety Handbook. It's put out by the American Herbal Products Association, and it has an expert advisory council including Roy Upton, David Winston, Aviva Joe-Ram, Tiarona Lowdog, and many others. And it's edited by Zoe Gardner and Michael McGuffin. This is a very thick book. So, and we go to the trifolium pratense, and safety class 1, which is very safe. Interaction class A, which is no interactions, and contraindications, none known. That's just the general summary. But then I love this part that talks about the anticoagulant coumarins. So red clover is commonly cited as a potential anticoagulant due to the presence of coumarins and confusion between coumarins and the anticoagulant drug Coumadin, sometimes referred to as coumarin. An anticoagulant is basically blood thinning, so we don't want our blood to be too thin, because if we cut ourselves, it's not going to coagulate, or if we bruise, it doesn't have the ability to stomp, to thicken and stop bleeding, and so you could bleed out. So, that's a concern. However, a screening of red clover for 17 naturally occurring coumarins identified 5 coumarin compounds in red clover, 1 with anticoagulant activity, 1 with procoagulant activity, and 3 with no activity reported. No changes in bleeding or blood clotting were observed in women after 30 days of red clover supplementation, and that was a scientific study that is referenced here. So that's very interesting. I find that very interesting. And also I love this cue into the fact that herbs are so complex, right? There's not just one coumarin, there's 17. And this one plant, potentially, depending on where and when it was harvested and how it was dried, and, maybe different plants have different amounts, obviously, of these. But in general, the red clover has 5 of these coumarins, and 3 of them don't even matter, have no activity. One's procoagulant and one's anticoagulant, and this is the complexity that offers modulation, right? So our body can take what it needs and not use what it doesn't need, and that's why often we can't say like one herb has one effect in one direction, because there's such a complex of chemistry that depending on what we need, our body can pick and choose, and then it's going to have a different effect on different people, and maybe even a different effect on us at a different time. But just trusting in the inherent wisdom of nature, the complexity, the variation that is way beyond, I think, our comprehension. And that, but just knowing that we are a part of it and just trusting that to some degree, I mean, within reason, we can really start to see that herbs are a lot more modulating versus drugs being very one direction. Like the Coumadin drug is going to have one specific action and that's it. The red clover is going to have multiple different actions depending on what you need, and overall is going to be very modulating. So, and then also in that book, it talks about the isoflavones, which are can be turned into quote-unquote phytoestrogens and can bind with different estrogen receptor sites. And they were talking about, in one study, it seemed like the red clover isoflavones were binding more with the receptor sites involved with the brain and bones than breast and uterine. And that also that there's no concern about the effects on the endometrium growth or bleeding or any of that based on red clover ingestion, which I think has been a concern in the past, but has been studied and is fine. So overall, I'm not going to be taking like concentrated extracts of red clover in capsule form. I'm going to be drinking Nourishing herbal infusion of red clover blossom once or maybe twice a week, and knowing that I'm getting all of these benefits. And a lot of the benefits, because it's in a legume family, it's in the same family as beans, and we know beans are really beneficial for women's hormones. And so we get all of those benefits, but without the hard to digest beans, right? We're not getting that seed coat in the beans that causes gas and bloating and digestive upset. So if you've been told that you need to have more beans in your life for heart health, bone health, hormone health, but you don't like eating beans, I mean, I personally love eating beans, but this is one way to go about it without having to eat beans, but still getting all of the benefit. So what benefits does red clover have to offer us as well? Well, it's basically a nourishing tonic for our blood, for our bones, for our skin, for our lymph, for our lungs, our stomach, our intestines, our endocrine glands, and our reproductive organs. So beneficial. It's what's known as an alterative, which in my mind it means it alters our body toward a greater state of health by working with the organs of metabolism and elimination. So by working with our liver, our blood, our lymph, our kidneys, and our overall ability to digest. And a lot of herbs are in that category, but red clover is a really nice one. Okay, so there's our red clover infusion. The infusions, we have like the brunettes, we have the comfrey leaf, which we'll see, and the nettle leaf, which lead like a really dark green. So I call those the brunettes. And then there's the blondes, the oat straw and the linden, and then the red clover is our red-headed gal. And this is just a really delicious infusion. I find it tastes like Earl Grey tea. So it has the tannins of tea, but also the floral, sweet accents that the Earl Grey offers. So really beneficial for the skin, really beneficial for respiratory, especially if you have a really spasming cough. So it's antispasmodic, can kind of relieve that coughing, the unproductive spasming cough. Really beneficial for enhancing fertility in both men and women. Nervous system, very calming for the nervous system, really supporting the immune system and the lymph. because of all the minerals, really helps with bone health, and obviously also the isoflavones, if it's binding with the receptor sites that are helpful for bone health as we go into menopause and as our estrogen reduces. This is one way and affects our bone health. This is one way that we can, and our brain health, red clover can help counteract that. Also, just for menopause in general, really helpful in easing that transformation. What else? We have okay, this is an interesting one. It's a discudient. So it helps to break up cysts and help them move on. People will apply like a topical red clover infused oil, but also as a nourishing infusion. So breast cysts, or even sebaceous cysts, like that are just under the skin. And then a really, really great herb in cancer therapies. So it actually has been shown to inhibit tumor growth. It helps to clear waste through the lymph. It also is known as an anti-angiogenic, which means it can help stop the tumors from growing their own blood vessels, so that it can slow the growth or inhibit the growth of tumors. Because if the tumors are creating their own blood vessels for food, then this can help to slow that down or inhibit it. And then also specifically worked with for breast cancer, prostate cancer, and lymph cancer. So beneficial, full body health, but also in cancer therapy, and a lot of the concerns out there as far as phytoestrogens and it being estrogenic. Well, those phytoestrogens, quote unquote, actually bind with the receptor site, but it's a loose bind. So that it blocks the more harsher, more dangerous estrogens, like the xenoestrogens that come from our environment, and our own estradiol or estradiol, which is the more dangerous estrogen that we only produce during our childbearing years. Once we enter menopause, we no longer produce it. We still produce all of our other estrogens, all 29 of them. And it's just that 1/30th, the estradiol, that can really cause problems. And the phytoestrogens, the plant constituents that our body can transform into chemicals that then can block those more harsher estrogens. And so that's how that helps. But again, it's a loose bind, so it offers more of a modulating effect again, where if we don't have enough estrogen effects in our body, it can bind with the receptors and give us more beneficial effects. But if we have too much estrogen, or we want to block the more dangerous estrogens, it can do that as well. So very modulating in nature. So hey, cheers to red clover. Woohoo! Go out and get some.